Yeah. I, I feel like spectating should cost more because you are contributing nothing. When you play, you contribute to someone else's learning and to the teacher, possibly, or instructor or whatever, the person running the thing, possibly learning something from your participation. You sitting on the sideline helps no one but you. So you should pay more.
Well, and also the spectators are going to, some of them are going to put in their appetizer on the website that they attended this in their qualifications. You know, it's
Facebook. As usual, you're joining the conversation ongoing.
When you start doing more seminars, you're going to see people that'll pay for the seminars to show up, get their picture taken with you, and that's it. And they'll go up on the wall in their training hall, and they'll talk about how they trained with you. But literally, that's all they did was. And some will try not to pay and just take the picture. You know.
That is a after Facebook Live is over conversation because we're gonna have to disincentivize that shit.
Well, right. So we kind of accidentally did that, and what's coming up in Idaho is if you show up as a spectator, it's like $175 for the class, $200 if you want to just watch. So,
I like it.
Yeah, I think that we should make that a standard thing, at least within our group.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Shit,
I'm point.
Yeah. Don't want to get sweaty and bloody, then you pay more.
Because this is where Casey would throw something in there about murmurs well, and the cost associated with the knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna pay blood, sweat, or money, or tears.
Or all.
Yeah.
Usually all. In my experience, all.
If it's a big thing, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're here talking about losing well. Part of the thought process was everybody takes losses. Life is jam-packed with them. Depending on how you define it, more or less. But one of the things that self-protection is supposed to do is change people's relationships to failure. And because loss and failure are not necessarily the same thing, you can fail without losing and lose without failing. How do we perceive loss? And I'm leaving it somewhat open-ended, not talking about specific types of losses. And then how do we make it useful? Because if it's going to happen either way, we might as well make it useful, or at least try to avoid it being useless. Mr. Miller, what do you think?
I'm writing down notes real quick. So one of the things, I can't remember who said first, it might have been Carol Dweck, is that all extraordinary people have a very similar relationship to failure.
Mm-hmm.
And they find failure to be a good thing. That's the fun place. That's where the learning happens. That's where the growth happens. If you can maintain that attitude to failure, then you keep taking chances and risks and learning. If you're afraid of failure, then you tend to not try to avoid the possibility of failure, and that really hampers your growth. So that fear of failure is failure is a tool, or failure is a data point. The fear of failure, and like we talk about the attributions, the stuff that we throw into shit, that's the stuff that actually makes it so damaging. It's not the failure itself. So the notes, I was sitting here taking notes. Tom Brown, who's a tracking instructor, has something he calls a sacred question, which is, what is the lesson here? And if you apply that right, that turns every failure into a learning opportunity. The equivalent in grappling is it's physically impossible to lose a grappling match. You either won, which is cool, or you lost, in which case you learned, which makes you harder to beat next time. So there's literally, if you frame it that way, there's literally no way to lose a grappling match. And probably not for now, but if it comes up, because I've been talking too much already, is scale reframing. Well, and now that I brought it up, I've got to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things, if you shoot for the moon, if you try to get a perfect score, you probably won't achieve it, but you'll do better than if you shoot for mediocre, or if you shoot for barely passing. It's one of the things, whatever you shoot for is kind of your upper limit. You will almost never do better than you aim for. But the people then reframe, because what actually happens in any situation, there's a total win, and then there's an acceptable win. Anything below this is a loss, anything above this is impossible. But when they go for that total win, then they start thinking that 90% win was somehow a loss.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things you have to be careful to frame is one of the guys on my team, we did a exercise. It was put together by some people that were trying to set us up to fail, and we won. But when Dale was walking out, he goes, it was a win. It was an ugly win, but it was a win. I remember ugly win is still a win.
How do you distinguish, if at all, failure from loss?
I consider loss to be an outcome and failure to be something that I did.
Okay. So the outcome that may be completely outside of your control versus what you did or didn't do.
And in real life, the outcome is always outside of your control. A meteor could smash you, a drunk driver could get involved. There was a paraphrase in a book called Gimp, where the guy was an athlete and then became a quadriplegic. And one of those, sometimes all you get is the fight.
Mm-hmm.
The win's not automatic. All you get the fight, and sometimes you have to be grateful that you get that much. And that comes from I think it was Hillel, one of the Jewish philosophers, is you have a right to the work. You don't have a right to the outcome. You can't control that. But you should be, in my opinion, grateful that you have the chance at the work. You have the chance at the fight. But the outcome is largely out of your hands. If I fuck it up, then I failed. If I lose, then I just lost.
Paul, what about you?
So I scribbled out a bunch of notes. Rory nailed one of mine, jiu-jitsu guy. So you either win or you learn is one of the ethos. And it has to be in an environment where you, especially early on, you're going to lose a lot more than you're going to win, right? And you're going to brush up against whether or not it's a tap experience. Maybe it's just a rolling for control or position, right? Learning from that feeling. And, what are the, I was told by a student that I had little mini quotes in class. And if there are moral victories, that implies that there are also moral failures. It implies the existence of moral failures. In the case of grappling, a moral victory might be dealing with somebody flattening you. That feels like failure. I can't move. But the win is I got through this and I learned how to deal with that just a little bit better. One of the overarching or big sweeping concepts that I try to brush up against from time to time, especially for external perceptions. If you feel or experience a loss, it reminds you that you're probably enriched because the experience or connection happened in the first place. You don't experience loss, you don't feel it if you didn't have some sort of skin in the game up front. And one of the reasons I joke all the time that I would never really want to leave New England is you really enjoy spring here because you get the shit kicked out of you all winter long. Enjoy the change and those horrible March days of garbage weather, but you kind of earn that first really nice 65-degree sunny day, and you enjoy it more because of the crap that led up to it. So if you're enriched from the experience, or if you're enriched from the relationship, or if you're enriched from the lesson, then it's worth the pain that it might be causing you along the way. And I guess the loss of ego as a potential side part of that.
You mean my ego can lose?
I know mine can. I don't know about yours, Malcolm, but mine can.
Shit, my ego will find an explanation unless I drag it up to the mirror and hold it up there.
Roy, do you want to walk out that note you just
sent can you kind of explain that, because they can't see what you put in the chat?
Well, if I put it in the chat on this one, it's because any of us could talk about it.
Well, you talk about it.
So
you wrote it.
Well, I wrote it because Paul made me think about it, so if you wanted to riff on it. One of the things that we're fighting is real success is usually invisible. It's like you made some good decisions, you didn't get raped, that's a success, but not being assaulted doesn't look like anything.
Real quick, Tammy Yard McCracken is watching. Tammy, you should be jumping on with us.
Wow, way to put her out there. She might be watching for a second and then leave. He was like,
"That's fair. That's fair." I just found it funny. Sorry, Rory, go ahead. Keep going.
It's fine. And that goes into, like, you notice every bad driver on the road. You don't, the 100 that you don't notice, that's what good driving looks like, is you don't notice it. So we tend to notice, I think the reason a lot of relationships fail is that the good stuff tends to fade in the background. And so you start focusing on the bad stuff, and soon that's all you're thinking about. And you get the 99 fantastic things and you obsess on the one thing that's not a big deal, but after thinking about it long enough, suddenly it becomes terrible, and this relationship will not work. So that's, again, related to the dealing with loss, is sometimes you have to actually dissect it hard consciously to realize it wasn't a loss. And what really got this conversation going was, all of us know people or have had the stories ourselves, is the one fight we walked away from, which we've been telling everyone that that's the smartest thing to do, and it is legally, ethically, but it's actually, as a male, it feels terrible, and we have to, educate our students to be strategists, where, it feels terrible because part of your brain still wants to impress a female chimpanzee. So you might get some wild chimpanzee sex, but that's not how the world works anymore.
I think we should walk that out too, because
careful.
I'm not walking out wild chimpanzee sex. But I think, Rory, you hit on a point that I think has held up a lot of people for a lot of years. The time that somebody walked away from a fight, or whatever it was. Fighting ends up being special for all the reasons we've already talked about. But, like, it's easy. I don't know if that ever goes away. We were talking about this before we got on, right? Rory, you might remember, I was bouncing and a fight didn't happen, and I kind of felt like it should have. And I'm phrasing this purposefully because of how stupid it was. A fight didn't happen. I kind of felt like it should have. Everybody walked away safely, and the goal was achieved. But some tiny little 11-year-old Malcolm inside of me was like, pussy. And I was like, no, but I'm a big boy now. And so one of the things that can be useful is to acknowledge that some of that bullshit will take a long time to go away, or may never go away, and just catching it before it actually does anything.
I think one of the things that helps, and it's really hard to decide how much of your experience is normal for certain venues or not. But I find particularly that it goes away when you see the consequences of the people that didn't do the smart thing. However many funerals you've been to, how many friends that are, just fucking crippled, whatever.
So we need positive reinforcement. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that we only have, how many of you know the word contrafactual?
I've heard counterfactual, not contrafactual.
Okay, contrafactual is the idea that we can't know what would have happened if it had gone the other way. So we get out of the fight, but we can't know what would have happened if we decided to fight. We can't know how that would have ended up. And so this gives us a little, oh God, if we'd only done this, this was, and so you have outcomes that were good, but you can imagine that they might have been better if you'd gone the other way. Once you get enough experience to see how badly they can go the other way, then that is literally the only thing that it helped me get over some of the decisions where my 11-year-old Rory was going, pussy.
And you know what the problem is, though? I agree with you, and I don't. Like, I have found excuses to perseverate over completely irrelevant, ridiculous things. Like, that's just who I am, unfortunately. And I have sat there and watched stuff go bad for other people, and still something inside of me is like, it would be different for me. And it doesn't make any logical. It's part of the reason that this might just be a Malcolm thing, but it's part of the reason that I just have accepted that bullshit might be deeply ingrained enough that it's never going to go completely, but I can catch it. And part of the way that I've caught it is, all right, so the night that completely non-event occurs, what do? I get home, I think about it, debrief with my then girlfriend, now wife, and she's like, you're an idiot. I don't even know why you're thinking about this. Mm-hmm. And send Rory an email like, hey, man, look, I need this to not settle wrong. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm reaching out to somebody whom I respect to give me permission to make the decision I already made so that I don't let it sink into some bullshit. So for people who might have the same thing, do that. If you realize, okay, this isn't going to work, I can watch somebody get shot, literally see them on the ground bleeding and be like, it would be different if I did it. Reaching out to other people as training wheels can help you lose well.
We don't have time to get into this now.
We never do.
But one of the things we should always talk about.
Well, we do. We have the next hour and a half.
But one of the things we really need to talk about is how there's almost 180-degree difference between how experienced and inexperienced people see things like grading. It's no experienced person does anything dangerous alone if they can help it. Inexperienced people, that whole, no, I need to do this myself. Never fucking. If someone said that on a SWAT team, they would be off the team. It's like, it's so that's one of the. So that's something we can explore because we've been spoon fed. I don't even know where this came from originally. This idea that heroism involves not getting help.
Hollywood, like most bullshit, Hollywood.
Right, but which the professional goes, not getting help is what we call, sorry, this is a politically incorrect word, we call fucking retarded. Okay? It's the idea that, I'm going to clear this house by myself. No, fuck, that's why we have teams.
I think, all right, to pause it and then jump into it when we get into the Zoom call with the patrons, $10.
10 whole dollars, Malcolm? That's so expensive.
10 whole dollars, man. It's like a latte and a scone.
That's like $12.
Listen, I don't go to Starbucks. I think that part of it is I think it's older than Hollywood. I think there's a lot of misunderstood stories, fairy tales, etc., that people interpreted as the hero goes in alone and slays the dragon and dies valiantly, and they didn't understand that the dying valiantly and the dragon were actually a message that says don't do it alone. But they assume that that's the sexy romantic part because it's interpreted through a lens of inexperience. And so dying valiantly is sexy.
We don't have time. Real quick, I just ran something on my mind.
Just saying.
Sure? Initially, my brain said movies because we're thinking current era. But if you roll back and look through most of history, the vast majority of, even back to oral tradition, you either had the lone hero, but when you actually read the story, the lone hero was propped up by all the people that were with him for the most part. But it's the hero's story, right? Most of them. Well, there's a couple, but the ones that I really think of, like a Herculean story. But he's a demigod, so it's not supposed to be relatable, right? Yeah. It's not supposed to be a human story. Anyway, we do have to switch over to the private call, and I really want to do this because Rory's going to be very excited by somebody that I see in the waiting room right now. I'm not going to tell you who, Rory, because it's more fun when you see this person pop up. So
cool.
I'm sure his face will be very expressive. It'll go from
Rory is the definition of expressive. Yes. Yeah, we're gonna get this. I think we might see these, Malcolm. All right, Facebook. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will
later, y'all.
See you guys next week.
Thanks.